What work should South Africa be doing to empower and enable young people to move beyond survival into growth and progress, especially in an environment of innovation and technology? How do we make sure that all young people understand the new world of work and can not only play a role in it, but become innovators and leaders themselves? Seipati Mokhuoa is the CEO of Strategic African Women in Leadership, SAWIL, and she's passionate about sharing a message of opportunity and access so that more young people can take their place in a changing world. Good evening, Seipati, and thank you very much for being with us on The Full View. I'm not going to start by quoting the dire statistics around youth unemployment and the depression that comes along with it. What I do want to invite you to do is to share your gospel of opportunity for young people in South Africa in a 4IR world.
Thank you so much, Imani, for having me, and greetings to all the viewers at home. As you've already alluded, I think we live in an age where technology is an advantage. We have access like the gadget that you're sitting with right now. So in terms of opportunities, really it is in your hands. And perhaps what we can do as leaders and as, I don't want to say government, but you know, most things are centered around that, is to empower young people by making sure that we actually give them access to technology. And data is a thing as well. So if we can just, that's just a little bit of advantage to improve their lives.
So if you look at how long SAWIL's been in existence, over the last 8 years, you've really focused your energies on this particular environment. But not only that, I want to go to some of the research that you're doing about the causal factors that separate young people from opportunities in a technologically advanced world. And I'd love for you to share some of the tenets of that research.
Yeah, so maybe just a point of correction. SAWIL is more for the women, the Strategic African Women in Leadership, but we do, I do other work in terms of HD Africa, and that's where I use entrepreneurship development to actually coach, empower, teach, and enable young people throughout the continent to have access to some of these things. And what we've seen in the past, especially during the pandemic, what I've noticed and really paid attention to is the fact that most businesses that do well are businesses that are centered around solving socio-economic issues. And I will say to the young people that we mentor and train that focus on your community, because finding their pain points and addressing them is easier because you live amongst them, so you know what the issues are. And I think impact entrepreneurship going forward is the way to go.
You know, when you talk about that and the latent opportunity in looking at your environment, making an observation about what's necessary, and then devising a solution around that, often we see the best inventions, the best innovations are those that solve, you know, ordinary problems. And sometimes these solutions aren't even that complex. But you do need to be in an environment that is enabling and supportive of an idea living in your head to a prototype, to a product that's actually marketable and available commercially. How do you see this environment of enablement and support in South Africa right now? What is missing and what is available? Yeah,
look, I think the opportunities are there, and I get misunderstood a lot for saying this, but we need to arrive at a point, especially as young people that see opportunities, at a point where we don't rely on government, especially our government. We've seen that it's not working, so are we going to complain until we are 50? No. Like I said, technology is an enabler. Let's focus on what's working. Let's take the opportunities in terms of the access that we have in the palm of our hands, and that is technology. I don't think we should be having conversations about who should be doing what. Take the initiative and start where you are.
Again, and often in this particular slot, you know, I have to ask our guests to talk to a young person in any of the number of communities around our country. It sounds simple for us to talk in the studio and say the opportunities are right there, and there's so much support that is available. It still boils down to the fundamental question, how?
How? Like I said, start where you are with the little resources that you have and look for opportunities in terms of people like myself. I took it upon myself to actually develop entrepreneurs throughout the continent, not just in South Africa. There are people who are thriving right now in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya, even here in South Africa, who I've never met before. But because they took their cell phone And with the little bit of data that they have, instead of watching Netflix, they looked for an accelerator program or an incubation program or an angel investor like myself. And today we have a farmer in Nigeria who's feeding, farming rice and is feeding his community, and now soon it will be a nation. And that guy, I've never met him personally, but through his cell phone, bare minimum usage of the technology that he has in his hands, he's able to thrive in his business.
It reminds me of a story we carried here on the SABC about 2 weeks ago. With two sisters, I think they were the Kamalo sisters, down in the Eastern Cape, where they used their 350 Rand, social relief of distress grant and turned it into a business opportunity. Now, it is tough. I don't think that what you're saying is that it's going to be easy, but even in a context where there is minimum income and minimal resources, something can be done. Perhaps the first lesson then is to realize that you're not always going to make it big immediately. Scale happens later. Talk to young people who are interested in making those mega millions, immediately. That the process of entrepreneurship perhaps sometimes begins slow and it is tough.
Yeah, it definitely is tough. I'm not in any way alluding that it's it's an easy process. If you look at, for example, SAWIL, I started it in 2014. At the time, I was an employee with one of the multinational insurance companies, climbing the corporate ladder myself. But when I left, I knew that this is now a full-time job that I can do. I didn't leave immediately. So patience was a virtue that I needed to actually, employ in order for me or for the organization to be what it is today. So it takes time. It's a lot of patience. And with the right support around you, really just brave it and push through.
It's also about pivoting. I mean, if I look at your own story and your own development, I mean, you talk now about taking that leap away from, a stable, cushy job, I imagine, but also you had skills in the financial services arena. That was the language that you understood. What you're doing now is, a couple of light years away from what your initial skill set was. You've got to be able to pivot. How do young people do that?
Yeah, so I think it boils down to knowing yourself and understanding, your key development areas, weaknesses, strengths, etc. So for me personally, even though I was in the financial services industry, the job that I was doing was always about development. I was always developing leaders. I was a leader myself at the age of 23. So I've always been in a position where I had to empower and develop people. And that's a strength that I know I have. I always say I'm a born strategist, so I can think on my feet, and when I have an idea, I go full throttle on it and actually bring it to life. So I think it boils down to understanding yourself and really figuring yourself out and making sure that whatever it is that you jump to, you can back it with your skills, with your strengths, and like I said, development areas are also key to understand so that you can seek help.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about help, and let's talk about the support that we often don't talk about. We talk about where you can go, forms you can apply, all of those sorts of things. Use your mobile phone. But psychological safety is something that is in short supply in our country. When you think about this tragedy that's happened at that tavern with all of those young people dying, and the funerals are taking place next week. That kind of emotional scaffolding is also part of that missing, support structure in South Africa. Where do young people find that?
Sure, Imani, I wish I had the answer to that question. It really is a tough environment for young people. And you're talking about the tavern situation, but the unemployment rate as well, it really looks doom and gloom. I can understand that, and I can appreciate
74% in that very critical band of young people, 15 to 24.
And this is the future of our country. So you can imagine if constantly statistics are showing that even young men, particularly now in our country, are either killing themselves or they're beating us up or they're killing us. So it goes to show that we are really in a dire situation in terms of leadership in this country. And I think our leaders, honestly, if there's a call to be made, that's where the problem is. We really need to step it up and help our young people. This is the future of the country. And if this is how things look now, what's the future going to look like? We're not going to have the Imanis of this world in the near future if things continue as they are.
Well, thank you for talking to us. I think every time we have conversations like this, somebody is listening and it serves as, as a compass and as an inspiration. So I really appreciate your insights with us this evening. Seipati Mokhuoa, who is the CEO of SAWIL.